Hello and welcome to another edition of Entheoradio, where we talk about shamanism, psychedelics, and altered states for healing. This is your captain speaking, Captain Hugh T Alkemi, also known as Travar. I'm here with two very special guests today. We're going to take a focus on the sacred mushroom rituals of the Mexican Meso-American subcontinent. And I'm bringing back a new little friend of mine, Rain Grant. She's going to be co-hosting with me today. Say hi to everyone, Rain.
Well, hello, and welcome. Thank you for being here and listening to this good info, Tom.
Hello. And so we have Tom Lane here, who is a author, and he is our new guest. Welcome. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey. Yeah, thank you for coming. I'm going to read your bio, Tom, for the audience who's listening. Tom Lane, after leaving his job as a forest ranger on a Hupa Indian Reservation in California, spent 9 months in 1973 living in the jungles of Palenque and the Sierra Madres del Pacifico of Oaxaca, training with one curandera and two curanderos, learning the ancient sacred rituals of healing, divination, spiritual traveling through the sacred mushroom ceremonies. These ancient rituals which were forbidden to outsiders are before revealed for the first time in this extraordinary journey into the world of the Mayans, Zapotec, and the Mazatec. Written from Tom's 1973 diary while through hiking the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine in 2016. It was originally for his three sons and adopted Vietnamese daughter about this time, and how he met their mother Shirley during the velada at the home of Maria Sabina, who is a known curandera of mushroom shamanism, during his second excursion to Cuautla de Jimenez in Mexico. Tom is an internationally acclaimed solar energy trainer and the only solar contractor among 45 inductees to the International Solar Hall of Fame in 1976. Wow! So Tom, you're really out there. There's this last little part about your book. In fact, I'll let you talk about your book. You got a book out there, Sacred Mushroom Rituals.
Yeah, it's called Sacred Mushroom Rituals. It's a search for the blood of Quetzalcoatl. This book, I spent a lot of time on it. I started writing it in 1973, and I waited about 40 years to finally publish it. I took a 6-month hike on the Appalachian Trail to write it, and part of it was that I didn't want those people to be bothered or have some people, bother them like they had bothered the people in Huautla. Now, when I went to Huautla, it was sealed off by the Army and the Federales. You had to sneak in or get in some way because Europeans and Westerners and Mexican so-called yippies or hippies couldn't get in there, or even any Europeans or Westerners. You had to have a reason for going in there. And I also participated in a lot of the other areas of Sierra Madres and Huautla, where I participated in different ceremonies of with the sacred mushrooms.
Sacred mushrooms.
So yeah, let's go into that. What exactly are sacred mushrooms? What do you mean? Which species of mushrooms are we talking about?
Well, I'm basically talking about the psilocybin species. In Palenque, my first experiences, especially at the rain waterfall at MesoAmerica, was with the Psilocybin cubensis. There was a lot of Psilocybin cubensis there. And it tends to be in various places, but in certain places, there were certain types of mushrooms, like especially in Huautla and most of the Oaxacas, there was the, what people some called the Durumbis or the Psilocybin caroluscens, and also Psilocybin mexicana. In particular, in certain places, there was the Psilocybin zapotecorum that was unbelievable. That was the one where they often are on landslides, but when I ate them in San Agustin de Sicha, they were right on top of graves. They were on like graves of different people in brujos there in the cemetery.
Wow. So you're saying that the durumbles, some of the Psilocybe zapotecorum, or the landslide mushrooms, as I understand durumbles to mean.
The rumbes refer to a landslide. Now, certain types of mushrooms really tend to grow on raw, bare earth, like the graveyards, like the western graveyards you see with a mound on the top, even in the middle of a swampy area. But, you know, after a hurricane or a heavy storm that hits the Sierra Madres, there'll be a lot of these type of mushrooms grow. The zapotecorum are quite unique, and they have way more psilocin than psilocybin to any of the others. Now, some of them get names like the Mexicana, they call them the pajaritos, or little birds, or the caruslans. That was referred to as the durumbis. The Indians referred to that as sort of like a Christ consciousness sometimes, where the Psilocybe cubensis, they would call the San Isidro mushroom after the patron saint of hard workers.
Yeah.
And then the zapotecorum, there were all sorts of legends about them, that dragons lived underneath them. The name of them was the crown of thorns.
Yeah.
Because they were considered too bastanti for most people. They wouldn't want to try this particular mushroom.
Wow. That is a mushroom that I've long awaited to cultivate and to experience. I've experienced some of the mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest, including one of the psilocybes that is considered the most potent that they've found in the wild is called the blue angels, or the azurens. And I've heard a friend of mine, Alan Rockefeller, who's a skilled taxonomist who goes down to Mexico. He gives out spores of zapotecorum, and that's becoming more popular amongst cultivators here in the States.
Well, I can see why. I met Alan quite a few times and gone to some of his talks, and I sent him one of his books because he let me use a lot of his photographs in my books. I could have just sort of got, he's got so many on Wikipedia. He's by far the best photographer, and I don't know if you've ever seen his poster. There's sort of two of them. One that he doesn't show very much. It's made by a guy from the University of Florida's mycology department. It's called Sacred Mushrooms, and it's in rituals. But I love his one that he helps support the people with down there, called Hongos Sagrados de Mexico. You know, the Hongos, Sacred Mushrooms of Mexicana. And he gives some of those, what you would call nicknames on them, like the little birds, the landslide of durumbis, the San Isidro, the crown of thorns, or, you know, in the legends of these mushrooms that dragons even grow underneath them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm very excited about that. Did you have something to say, Rain?
Oh, I was going to ask about the blue. What was the blue variety of psilocybe you were talking about? But I was going to ask, is that the same one that you would make blue honey with? Because I've used other types of psilocybin mushrooms to try to create this blue honey of sorts, but it turns blue like the rest.
Well, I think there's a lot of mistakes about the honey, and a lot of people don't really know.
Well,
the honey is used in a lot of the sacred ceremonies, but here's the interesting thing.
Hold on, Tom. So just for our audience listening, blue honey is any of the blue staining mushrooms in honey, and that's just a general modern.
Oh, okay. All right, I got it.
And it's not going to turn blue every single time.
It isn't. It's kind of like a variety of colors, and sometimes it's a greenish. But
yeah,
I do want to talk about the honey, and I was doing some research earlier about what you said about the wasps. Oh, but let's wait a second, because I want to answer her question about taxonomy. The blue angels, also known as I think the UFOs, they're Psilocybe azurens, and they grow in the Pacific Northwest. And they, I think, have more baeocystine than other ones.
Okay.
And they're different than Aztecorum, they're different than ceruleans, they're different than Mexicana, and they're different than Zapotecorum. And these are all Psilocybe, blue staining mushrooms.
Sure.
Personally, I think it's way more important, three aspects of how you take them, than any one particular variety.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, let's get into that. Tom, tell us how that you learned in the 70s. You say in the 70s when you're traveling down there?
Yeah, 73.
Jeez, long time ago.
Yeah, it was really primitive back then. Most of the roads were dirt roads. There was no electricity lines. There was no radio. There was no television. There was no refrigeration. When you were in a village, there was nothing plastic. I watched some Indians one time that had been playing and heard a recording for the first time ever. Their voice, in a ceremony they had been recording, but this was pretty isolated conditions, and I went pretty far off of the main tourist parts, a lot of it because some of the times we felt like the federales were after us, the people I were with. They had raided this one area that they normally didn't come to get rid of these people from California. I'll talk a little bit about that in my book. But the thing that I think is really overlooked a lot of people is that Quetzalcoatl, the winged, jewel-plumed male serpent, is basically the basis of these sacred ceremonies. And there was a man, Quetzalcoatl, who was a leader king of the Toltecs. He had taken over from his father.
Okay.
And he created the city of God and all this jewelry and everything. The main thing he did was he stopped war between tribes. He stopped human sacrifice. And he brought all this artistic stuff. There was like this explosion, of all Teotihuacan and all this stuff happened. You have to realize that before this, if you look from an anthropological standpoint, anthropologists, people were really primitive and they didn't have gods like we think of them. And they tend to have witches and sorcerers, but not like we think of witches and sorcerers. These were people that would rule the tribe, and mainly because they could go into some sort of trance or something and find out where the deer or the game was. They didn't have much agriculture. So part of the transition of Quetzalcoatl was also bringing corn, besides all the art and the singing and the dancing. And a lot of this philosophy is based on the Tuk, which is totally different than Eastern or Western philosophy. You've got to realize when they're talking about a god, they're not thinking about like a Roman or Greek or Tibetan or Egyptian or Chinese or pagan god. They give these names energy forces. And the only one that really has what you'd say human, like you would relate to a human, is like Quetzalcoatl, mainly because he was both male and female, and he could come in the wind. And in certain ceremonies, he actually does come in the wind. It just is amazing. But he taught these sacred ceremonies, and then a lot of people believe he left to the Mayans to Culiacan, and he became Culiacan among the Mayans. But there was sort of three people that developed out of these ceremonies, groups that were what you call the followers of Quetzalcoatl, even though nobles and some people would participate in them. One was the priest and priestess of Talak, and Talak was like a brother that could transform himself into Quetzalcoatl and shift as an avatar. Sometimes these people get really weird. They have 5 or 6 avatars, and sometimes somebody becomes a grandmother. But you got to realize these are all forms of energy and motion. They didn't believe in anything fixed, and they believed life and death had the same spine. And so this sacred male bird, from the penis of this bird, the blood that hit the earth, the sacred mushrooms grew, which implies a lot of sexual energy between the earth and the sun. And if you follow some of these sacred ceremonies, it's all about rebirth. Like, for instance, the Meso-Americans believe there are only 2 important days in your life: the day you were born and the day you figure out why. And that was what the ceremony was for, was sort of through rebirth. Now, a lot of these were healing ceremonies. There were certain ceremonies as the deified heart, which was to meet Quetzalcoatl, and there was ones like what are called the disembodied eye. which has to do sort of like with astral traveling. And then there were other ceremonies among groups of people to, you know, sort of have the travel situation become very peaceful. But the priest and priestess of Tlaloc, the Aztecs allowed them to stay around because, see, the Aztecs came in and found Teotihuacan 900 years after it had been created and said, our ancestors, we found this, our ancestors did that. Of course, it wasn't true that they did, but they allowed the priest and priestess because they had a lot of healing ability and the ability to make it rain. They would send to the mountain to rain. And then there was also the jaguar and eagle religious warrior knights. They were a type of knight. And they had a special place they met, carved out of a mountain, hidden way away in Palenque, where they celebrated the sacred mushroom rituals. And then you also had a group called the Pocotecas. And the Pocotecas, we would say, might be the adventurers. They are the people that went traveling and did all the trading, and they would trade for stuff, and they were sworn to fair trade. And they brought back feathers, they brought back jade, they brought back gold, they brought all sorts of stuff back to the nobility and the warriors and the empire.
Did they bring back mushrooms?
What?
Did they bring mushrooms?
Oh, well, yeah, and they taught these sacred ceremonies. The sacred ceremonies were taught, but they were sort of like when they get back, they had to live in a humble house. And every now and then the head of them would come around and say, okay, we're going to have a party. Everything in your house, we're going to give away or sell, and you're going to have a party. You know, so it was
Party.
A religion sort of self-sacrifice. The idea of the deified heart was a sacred ceremony to both meet and become Quetzalcoatl, to enjoin him. And he will come in these other ceremonies. He does come, and you could talk to C. Michael Smith. I know a lot of other people have witnessed him, and sometimes he'll come in every ceremonies. But in this particular ceremony, it was a ceremony with intent to both meet and join and actually become Quetzalcoatl. And part of the ceremony was you were expected to have done a lot of daytime and some nighttime ceremonies before, especially during the day, during clouds, and sometimes during lightning storms. And you would have done ceremonies at night, but you're going to fast at least 24 hours before this ceremony. And when these people do this, there's not a lot of talking. There's not a lot of talking going on. And then in my book, I mentioned on one page, the legend was that Quetzalcoatl gave the cacao for two purposes. One as an aphrodisiac, and the other was for a precursor to these sacred mushroom ceremonies. Now, if you take the raw cacao beans, which you do before the ceremony, Maria Sabina did this too, and you grind them up, okay? And now you just make a coffee out of them and drink it, you know? And it's from the raw beans, not anything artificial. And there's two bliss transmitters in there. One of them.
Raw beans, like fresh, or are they dried or prepared in?
Yeah, they're just the beans. They're just the beans. You can buy them online. And they're not expensive. You can get whole bags for $25.
They're not roasted. They're fermented, though?
They're not roasted. No, they've just been taken out of the cacao pod and taken out and put as a bean, like you pick a peanut out of a peanut, you know?
Okay.
Sure.
And that's where chocolate came from. But what happens is in the Dutch process, they put chemicals in there and alkaloids. They heat it up and they put it under pressure, and then they add milk and sugar to it. Sure. This was, you basically boil water like you could grind it up in a coffee grinder. I keep it in the fridge cold before I grind it up. You can grind it up in a coffee grinder, and then I boil water, and when it quits bubbling, then I pour it in it and stir it up. And I drink the little particles too, because I like the feeling. Now this is done 2 to 3 hours before. If you read about it, it releases a tremendous amount of serotonin. So the idea is it's going to get you in a good mode. It's going to get you feeling good, and everybody's feeling good. And then in the ceremony, you would take.
Sounds good right now.
Yeah, right.
We should all be sipping some cacao right now.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't have time to make mine. Yeah.
And
Next time.
then in the ceremony, you would sometimes build a little fire and you would plate candles in the 4 directions. And then sometimes people would blow a conch shell, especially to the east. But the important thing was that you had live living mushrooms, like that we brought out of the woods in bowls with the earth and everything. Or people could do this, bring in live mushrooms, or maybe ones that are growing. And right before we start, about 30 minutes, we'll start singing to them. Now, people will sing just from their heart or sing whatever. They're singing to the mushrooms. And I know this sounds unbelievable, but I've actually seen people without on the mushrooms actually pass out from seeing this. They start moving back and forth on their stipes like this, or stems, or up or down. It's like they're dancing, but they're not moving back and forth like that.
I totally believe that, because I like to sing
food for the body. That's one of the things the Curandero, Francisco Remedies that work with. He said, for anything else, it's food. You know, everything was hard, you know, living and everything around there. You know, there was no refrigeration. So it's food, and food for our body. And the Aztecs call this the holy flowers of the blood. Now, if you see the stelas of Xochimilco, these were in the high temple of the Aztecs, and the Spanish broke them into 3 pieces and painted them red. That was like destroying their guidance. These were guides to the ceremony, like the Yutu Tono Codex or the Vienna Codex. They have the flowers of the blood, and you can see the sacred mushroom as a flower on the tongue like that, with mushrooms out the side. And of course, at this stage, it's talak and talak size. Well, you eat these mushrooms, and when you're eating them with the honey, 2 at a time, and that's sort of symbolic to represent male and female, to remind you of that, is you never ever swallow. You never ever swallow. You just keep chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing. In a book, I hate to go into this scientifically, but what's happening is subliminally and buccally, it's going into the bloodstream, because your saliva and the honey have changed the carbohydrate of the mushroom to pure glucose. It's like a blood transfusion. And the psilocybin has been changed to psilocin. And what's happening, it's going in your mouth, your tongue, your gums, and the roof of your mouth goes straight to the spine and straight to your brain. Absolutely straight.
That makes sense.
And the inside of your cheeks, like I'm pinching here, or your tongue, that's why sometimes I would press it a little bit against my cheek because I was swirling around in my mouth. That goes straight to the ventral aorta of the heart. That's part of what they call the ceremony of the deified heart. And recently they found out that, you know, the heart and the body have a type of intelligence and can instruct you too. And I really believe that's the key to people solving a lot in their life, is connecting up to both the heart, conscious, and the unconscious. But in this sacred ceremony, when you're eating, you just keep eating them covered with honey, and then it's like you'll stop. You'll know when to stop, because it's like your flesh is starting to disappear.
So they're just pouring the honey directly onto freshly picked mushrooms, and then
we'd have a little bowl with the honey. We'd have a little bowl with the honey.
Now, Tom, you were saying
the mushrooms in and stir them up so they were totally covered, and then stick them in our mouth.
Okay.
So they were absolutely covered with honey. Like, you're sticking the mushrooms in honey and covering them.
Yeah, so this is interesting. I mean, blue honey is this really interesting topic that has been talked about on the internet a lot. You mentioned the other day when we were having the pre-interview handshake call that it was a honey that came from a specific hornet. And
a wasp.
A wasp. And I went up on Wikipedia and started poking around.
Bee, but it's actually really a wasp.
So I started doing some research, and I think it's this species, Brachygastria mellifica. Is that it? The bee mellifica?
Well, I sent you in the thing I sent you about the Vienna Codex. I sent you there was about this bee in there.
Okay.
And the bee was really honored by the Mayans. For instance, they had 2 celebrations a year. They would, when they and they consider the beast somewhat a sort of like a god.
Right, right. And so what I'm seeing also is there's this continuity of even like the rain deities that we deal with in the Norse canon. We have Tualak or Talak in the Aztec, and then Chak, which is the Mayan version of that word, and the Mayan deity, and then Cochio, Cochiho, Cochiho, or something like they.
You're talking about the female goddess.
Right. Okay. So they have.
She transitioned into the Virgin Mary. There's a whole chapter. I mean, the Virgin of Guadalupe. Absolutely. There's all sorts of articles about how she transitioned into the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Wow. Very interesting. So it feels like some of the deities are pretty consistent across all of the different eras of Mexican civilization, pre-Columbian Mexican civilization, and they have something to do with rain and lightning and storms.
Yeah, especially Talak with rain and storm, and Quetzalcoatl especially with wind. And I've been in the desert before when it's dead at night, and all of a sudden it's unbelievable. You have like a whirlwind around you, and all of a sudden Quetzalcoatl arrives when there's been no wind for a long, long time or long afterwards. And he was known as the god of wind and storms in his particular form as, I think it was 11 Reed or Siaktal. Okay. And he had different names for his different avatars.
That makes sense. And it's interesting because it's like almost like a living Santeria or saints religion, where like saints show up as avatars in the tradition of incarnation in those civilizations, right? So they're gods and spirits, but then they can also kind of take a human form. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I don't think they take human forms exactly like humans do, but I don't know. You know, when Albert Hoffman took the mushrooms in Switzerland, he saw Aztec priests and Aztec knights and all this stuff. And I took the mushroom in certain ceremonies, and I would see on the adobe wall just all these Aztec figures and motifs running. And I had, I'm just sitting there stunned. I don't have any idea what it is, but I see them. But I had a friend who was a Russian midget who escaped from Russia in the Second World War, coming back when the Germans and made it to America. Albert Krauss, and a Vietnamese friend of mine, Con Dien, who was a Buddhist from Vietnam, and neither one of those had heard a word about, not anything about Aztecs, and they all saw the same thing.
Wow.
See, and a lot of those, these pyramids have musical motifs on them, and sometimes when you're doing those ceremonies, you can see those portals coming. You can see those musical portals coming.
Interesting.
And then you should always go in with intent. That's one thing I learned from my Francisco Ramirez and something. He's told me one time, I was like, I had to have intent. There was have to be a reason. In this particular ceremony, he held up a mushroom like this to me, and it literally became an eyeball. And it was like, follow me around and looking at me. And if I hadn't known he was a good person, I'd have really been bothered by that. But in this sacred ceremony, the sacred ceremony of the deified heart, what happens to me and happens to a lot of people is then after your body disappears, your skeleton starts to disappear. And then you feel like only your skull is left.
Oh.
And then you start coming back, and it feels like your spine is moving, like your spine is moving all around, like sort of crazy,
like a spinal wave.
A lot of people tell me that's a kundalini. I don't know what, to me, I'm just describing what's happening. But the spine is starting to move all over, and that's when Quetzalcoatl comes. And it's just like everybody says, it's jeweled, many diamonds, all in like, just like the dragon, but it's not like a Godzilla or anything. It's about human height, or Quetzalcoatl is. Okay. And, you enjoin Quetzalcoatl, you walk into him in this ceremony, and it's like everything turns into pure white light. Or some people that are healing, Quetzalcoatl will actually swallow them in the patient. I was out in Utah in Goblin Valley. We were trying to heal a person been in a motorcycle accident, and he was laying down, and Quetzalcoatl swallowed him just like a big anaconda, and he went through him.
Wow.
And you know, he was healed. And I think what it is one of the most powerful forms of pure life energy that comes. I know a lot of my friends that are Buddhists believe it's a naga, or that this sacred mushroom, that Quetzalcoatl found the secret to meeting this naga. And then later when he left, people gave this ceremony the name of Quetzalcoatl, because if you were a man or woman and you participated in this ceremony, after it's over, you gained the right to be called Quetzalcoatl, and you called each other Quetzalcoatl. And that was it. It was basically, Quetzalcoatl taught everything is love and pain, but you have to have joy about whatever is happening. And he tried to end any sacrifices, and he said the only thing you should ever sacrifice is like flower or butterfly, something like that. And
so would you say it's similar to like Christ consciousness? What were you saying? Were you saying that earlier, or have I?
Well, I would say so. You know, all sorts of people thought he was Christ. The Mormons think he was Christ.
Right. Yeah.
And some people think he was St. Thomas. Some think he was an Irish monk. Some think he was a Buddhist monk. There's all sorts of stories, but I think the main thing is the real truth is the experience itself of taking the sacred mushrooms this way. You will meet and encounter Quetzalcoatl, and he will come. And like when you see people that do this, it's amazing the biophotons come in their eyes. Their eyes look like they've got flashlights in their brain. And their whole face starts to glow. And the Aztecs said in this ceremony, your soul life will be implanted on your face from your heart. Your soul life from your heart will be implanted, and the whole body glows. And the healing in this is unbelievable, because the body just feels incredible. It's like all this energy is being used to heal.
Very interesting.
Sounds amazing.
So if you're listening, you're just joining us, we have Tom Lane here, solarwolf.org, and we have Rain Grant, Can Mushrooms Save the World documentary. She's rejoining us for a special interview where we're talking with Tom about sacred mushroom rituals of Mexico and Mesoamerica. I want to get back to some sciencey talk. I went and looked on Wikipedia. So I got Brachygastria mellifica, commonly known as the Mexican honey wasp, is a neotropical social wasp. It can be found in both North and South America. It is one of the few wasp species that produces honey, and is considered this honey is considered a delicacy in some cultures in Mexico. The wasp species is of use to humans because they used to control pest species and pollinate avocado plants.
Oh, no kidding.
So that's kind of, it's sort of a trip that so honeybees, as far as I'm aware, aren't indigenous to Mexico and North America. We introduced those with the Columbus and all the explorers and stuff.
Yeah, as part of the Columbian exchange. And Francisco Ramirez said the honey's the same. Honey's honey, you know, it's made from the nectar of the plant. The cones are real different, though. The cones are, I'm sorry, I used to raise honeybees.
Wow.
The African ones, and you know, they're much thinner cones, and they're sort of black, and the honey is really tasty. But the little old bee, it looked more like an ant to me with wings, you know.
This is the wasp you're talking about?
Yeah.
And it was you actually used wasp honey over the mushrooms.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
Amazing.
Archaic, and I would assume that it has a special quality to it. They were saying in this article on Wikipedia about bee mellifica, the honey wasp of Mexico, that it was comparable to bees that had been wild foraging with a special plant. I'm trying to figure out what special plant it was. Like there's bees that can go after, I think it was, where is it? Mesquite. So like the desert honey
Okay.
that we get in the
Acacia.
southwestern. Yeah.
Well, you know, when raising bees, here's the thing. I've raised a lot of bees and had hives, and I've even worked with beekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Is bees get pollen from just about every single plant. They get, and pollen can kill them if it's got insecticides on it. It comes back in the hive because they drag it back on their legs. But they get that from all plants, but only certain plants do they get nectar from that they make the honey out of. There's only certain plants, and there's certain ones, and you know, orange groves, Tupelo honey.
Mm-hmm.
We have one, a swamp honey here. They, you know, in Florida, and
Swamp honey.
what?
Swamp honey?
Yeah,
Wow.
these berries, gallberries. They call them gallberries.
Wow.
They're and Tupelo basically comes from swamplands too. But any type of flowers,
Florida or Louisiana.
For instance, in the spring and fall, my bees used to make a lot of honey from basically plum trees, the wild plum trees, and that honey tastes like blackstrap molasses. If you would give a jar of my honey to 10 people, only 1 out of 10 would ever like this, and they would love it. It tastes like really strong, like blackstrap molasses. And of course, clover honey, you know, orange groves is very sweet. And there's a honey from Chile when I was down there I got from bees called umaf that comes from a huge monster tree, unbelievably big tree. Wow. And it's sort of like a white honey. And honey's the purest food in the world because it doesn't have to be digested. It can actually go put it on your skin and have it go into your body.
Sure. Have you heard of the psychedelic honey from these honeybees actually make a psychedelic honey, and I believe that's in Nepal. And
well, there's people talking about that, but I don't really think it's psychedelic. From what I've read about it, it's made from rhododendrons.
Oh yeah,
basically getting poisoned. You know, just because you know they get this honey and it has the ingredients from either probably the nectar and maybe some pollen of rhododendrons, and it's really a type of poisoning.
Right, right. Like, that is a poisonous plant. I just recently saw a documentary about it. They went down there and studied these guys that would climb the cliffs to gather this honey, and the trips seemed to be extremely painful. So I wondered who would want to put themselves through that.
They like immediately get high on it right afterwards because they're all stung up, right?
Well, you gotta watch out how some things, because there's a lot of strange things in the Orient. I used to drink this type of sake called habu sake, which had the venom of a copperhead or a rattlesnake in the sake, but it had been transformed and it would unbelievably make you feel good. It was made in Okinawa.
Wow.
So, you know, I think you got to be aware of what a lot of these things are. You know, sometimes you got to realize you're dealing with not an ethogen so much as you're dealing with a poison. And poisons have just different effects on the body. I mean, like, you know, having the flu and being really sick with something like the flu is, for instance, is almost hallucinogenic. You're almost, some types of being sick have a type of
sure, or being in a deep meditative state, like doing Tai Chi standing positions might put you in that zone. I've noticed that, you know, because you're working with the brain and energy and whatnot.
Right. And the basic thing I found with the sacred mushroom, and I write about that, and this is my book for the average person, is, you know, I feel like the plant itself is the one that chooses who will have an opportunity. Not that they have to accept it, but usually the choice involves one path or another, and they have to do it if they're going to take this path. But to be a curandero, or what you might call a medicine man or woman, but the particular power of the mushroom to heal the body, to me, involves when you're sitting still and your conscious and unconscious mind are alive, and especially during the day, you can see your arms, you can see your body, and your heart through your body is intelligent, and it's part of the triangle that's going to instruct your mind. For instance, if you have hateful thought, like whatever it is. It could be negative, it could be racist, it could, whatever is like a thought that your body intuitively is not feeling good, your body is telling you, hey, get rid of that and change that channel. Because when we come out in the world, we come out with all this epigenetic DNA and all this ancestral stuff, but also from the time we're born, we get all these things that build up as tensions in our body. And I've seen some people on sacred ceremonies, their first one, especially if they do a lot, just vomit stuff out of their body that's unbelievable, or poop stuff out, or just sweat stuff out, or they're getting rid of tensions in their body, places where it's locked up. And there isn't really an esoteric secret of that, just to know that you can do it. And a lot of it depends on breathing, like breathing deeply, like, and letting it go up and down your spine. You know, you can feel your breath right as you breathe in and out going, and you can stop it back and forth. And it's almost like playing a magical instrument to get rid of these tensions and everything.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
change.
Yeah, I do believe the tensions will make you more sick, you know, relaxing into it. And just, I find stepping into my gratitude and just feeling really grateful, and then my body relaxes. I notice that. And then the nausea would go away or whatnot. And I'm just like, yeah, you have to relax. These things seem to bring out that, you know, show you where you have tensions and where you're having blockages in your body.
Yeah, well, that was basically what Quetzalcoatl taught, was that we should have gratitude and joy for the love and the pain, because this was our life, and there's no motion. Things can't move unless there's both love and pain, and, you know, life and death share the same spine. And that with gratitude and joy, we can live like we want to on this earth, you know. But you see a lot of talks, for an example, on TED Talks, or some sort of person who's pontificating about something, talking. And one of the things they often mention is, in the morning, if you get up, if you can think something you're really grateful for, and just for a few minutes, and when you go to bed at night, think about something you're really grateful for and go to bed thinking about that. Well, it's an attitude, because happiness is something you never acquire, but you can have joy, you know, and joy for living. And you may be happy about what's going on or not, you know. And the other thing Quetzalcoatl said, that the prime being, the cosmos gave man and didn't care for too much, was knowledge. And not knowledge like, you know, the apple of good and evil, but that when you learn these ceremonies and you learn these certain things, you should be really, really humble, because people that think they have knowledge, they're really, really sort of like, yeah, it's you got to be very careful. You got to be really humble. And in some of these things, that, like especially the one they call the crown of thorns, it gives you so much power of divination that you could see past in ways that you would choose to go. And boy, it makes you, if you're a normal person, scared to death to think or let anybody know that you would think you have this power, that it belongs to you. You just stand on it. You just enjoy it, or people come around you when you're doing it. I mean, it's not something that actually belongs to you. Right. It's just like if there was a waterfall or river going, and you went and got in it and got in this waterfall or this river, this current of energy, it would be insane to say the river was yours, you know, but you could show people and say, hey, there's a river, let's go over in it. And all you have to do is realize whatever's happening here, you know, you have to approach it with love, and love out whatever you see, because all these figures and things are coming. Sometimes in the beginning during the day, it's like you can see the little saint children and the little children playing and everything, and they're like little clowns. But some of these viajes are sort of where you want to go, and the type of portals you want to enter in life. And that's why I say you should always consider this a sacrament. If you don't have something that's sacred in your life, you're in real trouble. I mean, to me, that's what this whole digital world and everything is coming to. They're trying to eliminate the sacred aspect of life. And I really believe what I'm telling you about Quetzalcoatl and Talak and these other people I've seen, it's like, it's not just me, other people did, but it's sort of like been hidden. This has been hidden. a lot because I think people think you're a nutcase or they don't want to talk about it.
It seems like a lot of these more sacred knowledge from the past. It seems like throughout all of the different indigenous cultures throughout the world, a lot of it has been lost. And you know, I'm seeing a lot of similarities between some of the things you're talking about with the Aztec and the, you know, South American more that way of looking at things, but the Inuit, and then also over towards Siberia and whatnot, and they study you know, that's a totally different mushroom that they're intaking up there. But I'm seeing similarities between some of the like histories, like saying that like the sperm of the gods somehow are spreading on the land, and the mushrooms are spreading. You know, it's like similar. I see similarities there, and yeah, I find it interesting, but they've lost a lot of their information within their cultures as well.
Well, you got to realize the Spanish and the friars, when they came, especially Cortez, these weren't the King's Spanish soldiers. These were bloodthirsty mercenaries. These were blacks from North Africa, Spanish, Moors, Greeks, Portuguese, Italians, and they were all bloodthirsty mercenaries. And of course, when the priests came behind and they wanted to destroy all these ceremonies, and nobody ever tried to even understand the metaphysics of the Tuk and what this was all about. And a lot of these were destroyed. Now, some of the things have been found, like
trauma to the people. That's when we lose our information, you know?
Yeah, well, fortunately, a lot of the Mexican stuff has been recovered. For instance, the Vienna or Vindiosa Codex, Mushroom Codex, page 25, has been recovered. Well, it wasn't recovered, it was taken to Austria.
Okay.
And it's sort of in worn out shape in Austria, but the British Museum, I sent you a lot of pictures of the British Museum, you know, restoring that particular one. And that shows the whole sacred ceremony with two sages down by the sacred river, and this mushroom sage or curandero is talking to Quetzalcoatl in his form as the wind god, 11 reed, and then you see the actual symbols for the mushroom, like four lizard is a symbol. Four lizard symbol is for the mushrooms when they haven't been taken, the sacred mushrooms. 11 lizard is the symbol when they're in you, and you see Quetzalcoatl walking toward the sacred Valley of the Dead where Talak was. And this was a ceremony of death and rebirth and going into the underworld to be reborn.
Wow.
And then above that, you see like Quetzalcoatl scraping the head of death with a special instrument he developed for mushroom ceremonies. It's this type of drum. And they had asked him to make us a symbol like the other, but make us a symbol. And he said, but God's everywhere, flowers, he's everywhere, bees, you can't make a symbol. And they said, well, make something. So he made a tree, and he said, with arms outstretched, one for pain and one for love. And he carved this drum out of the log while he's rasping on the head of death. And in these sacred ceremonies, you're supposed to be on like a straw mat or on the earth, and usually you have your shoes off. And the symbols show this a lot. And what's happening, you're starting to resonate with the earth. As all of a sudden your body's starting to vibrate, and you can feel the earth vibrating up through you. But when you look at Xochipilli, who's the prince of flowers and ethogens, looking at Quetzalcoatl, there's like a tear in his eye. He's just so happy that he's starting this journey. And back behind him is that black wasp bee that was used for the honey. That's a symbol. Then up above, you see these sacred things, the urn for the honey, the wall of creation, and they show ropes like, and there's these symbols where you haven't completed your life and haven't been tied. But if you start at the bottom, there's a symbol for eternity. And right above that, when you start into the sacred mushroom ceremony, it's a symbol for a different type of time. A time that just seems to go on forever, but it's not like ordinary time. And it's a different symbol, like an A and circled and
I see it.
And the flint to the side of it. Now, then up above, you see 7 initiates. One of the initiates is like you know, like it would be you or Rain or somebody that would be an initiate sitting in front of this. and they're all holding mushrooms. And almost every one of these are holding mushrooms, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. And then you have 6 different sacred deities that represent different type of portals, like Eagle Woman, 9 Eagle Woman, 11 Reed and stuff. And then down below that, you have Quetzalcoatl plunging into the underworld. It looks like he's plunging into what he's plunging in. And when he comes out, you can see that the ball of creation he has on his foot, the 4 different directions. And now Talak is there in the eagle warrior garb, and he's holding 2 mushrooms, and Quetzalcoatl in his a different avatar, which has a face looking backwards and forward like Janus, is holding 3. And you see in the sacred water, the knot has been tied into the rope, and now the foot's on the ball controlling the boat, the ball. In other words, you're gaining control of your life.
Okay. This is the ball time, the wheel thing that.
Well, it looks like a ball, and in this trough, it looks like a floating ball, like a volleyball, with 4 quadrants, with bare feet on the 4 quadrants. And the one when he's plunging in, the ball is floating out. And he doesn't have his life under control or organized.
Yeah.
You know, they considered you a vagrant on the earth till you were reborn. You're just a vagrant here.
For people that are listening,
when you're reborn, you have a purpose in life.
Where can people that are listening see this image? I'm looking at it right now. Are you looking at it, Rain?
I'm not sure. I'm looking through the pictures that have been sent, and I'm not, like, I've got some of these really interesting looking images here.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Now, it looks like the one you've got, the actual real one, but I mean, that's in the museum in Austria, because it looks like a washed out white.
Austria.
Whereas the British museum did a reproduction. That's the old Curandero or sage who's talking to Quetzalcoatl at the start of the ceremony. And you see the symbol for eternity right to the side of them.
Do you have these pictures posted on your page, Tom? I know you run a page on Facebook where you're posting a lot of this.
Well, all of these on my Facebook, they're all there.
Okay. And what's the name of your
book,
Facebook page?
The last chapter has about this. The first 280 pages, I said, that's for normies, and then normal people. And I said, this is for people who want to go much deeper, who want much more than just to have some healing and gain a new consciousness or a new way of looking at life and to be healed. I said, this is for people who want to really drill down into some of these sacred ceremonies. And but the only thing I've really contributed to all of this, because there is another great thing the Mexican government archaeologists did recently. It's called if you look up the Utah Mushroom Codex, there's a thing called the pixographic representation of the first stone and its association with mushrooms. Now, this is if you just Google this, pictographic representation of the first stone and its association with ethnogenic mushrooms, there's this huge whole long article. The only thing they don't understand or miss, because everybody's been trying to interpret this, is about the black bee. Like Peter First, R. Gordon Wasson, Carl de Corgi, he's the one that was turned Wasson onto all the mushroom stones.
Okay.
And there's all sorts of people that have written about this. First, Wasson, and like I said, but this thing now is...
oh, I think I see it. Are you talking about the Mixtec one?
Yeah, it's called the pictographic representation of the first stone and its association with ethnogenic mushrooms in the 16th century. They built Mesotec Mushroom Codex.
Yeah.
Now, this is it's sort of like the official, what this is all about from the Mexican archaeologists and others that have studied this.
This is the one with 4 lizard in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can find it online. And for those of us who are looking for it, researchgate.net has a figure, researchgate.net. And again, you want to look for mushrooms, representations of mushrooms.
And if you do the Vienna Mushroom Codex British Museum,
and Rain,
you'll get up there what they've tried to make it look like it was pre-Columbian.
okay.
It was discovered among the Mixtec, which are the people of the clouds, but Cortez took it out of, well, that's where it's created near Oaxaca. But Cortez took it out of Montezuma's palace.
Okay.
Okay.
And there was another one he took out of Montezuma's palace that's still preserved. And I can't pronounce it right. Whoever hears this is going to sound, I'm doing it terrible. It's like the Utah Nuxal Codex or something. But it was like an encyclopedia for Montezuma of all the plants, of all how they were used, like in medicines and dyes, for regalia, for weapons, for sacred rituals of all types. And there was a sacred ceremony to what they call cleansing of the land when you did this. And part of this ceremony you see when Quetzalcoatl's going into this river, he's going there to recover some of these sacred plants for mankind. And so
could you
those were two that were taken out and they're still preserved.
Could you spell that codex name that you tried to say? I'm going to type it in real quick.
Yeah, good idea.
Because it's a Nahuatl word, Nahuatl language from Aztec.
Right.
But Rain, I just emailed you what he was talking about. If you want to look at that image, it's
okay. Thank you.
The 3 images he was describing, including the one that we found.
And I think I described that codex there and to you guys when I sent it to you as a letter. You know that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much sure. Let me see if I can find it again.
Yes. Okay, these are the same pictures I have on my phone. Yes.
Great. Yeah, so you can kind of see that there's a bunch of stuff going on there, including there's the bee, and then there's four lizard there, and he has mushrooms kind of growing out of his backside or his neck and stuff.
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier today, and it's kind of like I was looking at these images. Wow, very interesting, intriguing.
Yeah,
but hard to say what's going on other than the mushrooms growing out of the top of his head and out of his back.
Well, yeah, that's the one sitting down. We're sitting down. That's 4 lizard before Quetzalcoatl takes him, and it comes 11 lizard. Now here's the name of that codex. It's the codex, and I'll spell it ZOUCHE-NUTALL. And it's a botanical description of all sorts of plants, grasses, vines, reeds, trees, etc. It describes how they're used for food, textiles, dyes, regalia, weapons, decorations, woven math, and ethnogenic plants. The Codex
Xochinutal
NUTALL reveals the use of cocoa during rituals, and page 2 describes 9 rituals to sanctify or order the landscape for planned events. The most important was the raising of the bundle of sacred plants before the area to be sanctified. These plants were acquired when Lord Seven Places, that's Quetzalcoatl avatar, descends in the river and retrieves them from the underworld.
So they really funked up the spelling that I've seen. So Xochinutal or Xochinutal is the way to pronounce that. Xochinutal, like Nutella kind of.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 other codexes. I think
nice.
I'm trying to think of one of them, the Borgia Codex or something like that, that also shows sacred mushroom rituals and mushrooms being used. Another one was the stelas of Xochimilco. These were 3 stelas in the highest palace there, and they were 55 inches tall, 19 inches on one side, and I think about 10 on the other, made of basalt. And these 4 stelas tell the same story, but they're like carved into stone. But they actually show things like ceremonial rugs. They show how your feet should go. They show the sacred disembodied eye, female eye, the Quetzal single eye, following you on your journey. They show you in the mouth of the jaguar going into the underworld with the wings of Quetzalcoatl behind you, the drops of blood and self-sacrifice, the temple where you would be at when you were taking these mushrooms. And then when you're in the underworld, there's the rabbit that represents your soul spirit that's helping you go through it.
Wow.
And then you're ascending out of the underworld in the mouth of a combination jaguar, female Quetzal, eagle, and the serpent. And you can obviously see the person's in ecstasy coming out.
Does that have something to do with the aphrodisiac and the cacao, the raw cacao beans?
No, this is way past this. That got you ready a long time ago. This is for meeting and seeing Quetzalcoatl. And this, I mean, when you this is a really powerful sort of thing where, you know, the next symbol over there where it shows you is a symbol of a different type of time, because the sacred mushroom velada, they call it velada or vigil, it lasts a long time. It seems it lasts for years and years sometimes, you know, and
yes.
Then you come out of it and you're in a different type of time. Time has been changed to a different type of time because then you're reborn.
Interesting. So kind of want to bring it back to some of your experiences with Maria Sabina, because she is the major patroness of veladas in the 70s and before that. You talked a lot the other day, and maybe it's mentioned in your book quite a bit, about visiting with Maria and being in Huautla, and the other people that maybe were travelers or maybe weren't travelers down to Huautla and sat with Maria and other curanderas.
Well, I was mainly, I'd been to Huautla and done mushrooms with another Curandero man, but I was living in the mountains, actually just living there, planning on staying and living there. And I lived in a very, very remote area away from the roads or anything, on a pasture where hardly anybody came through except 2 shepherds, one a woman who would come through with her sheep, and then sometimes another man, the Curandero I told you about. Well, a friend of mine came and he had another friend. He said, let's go to Huautla de Jimenez. I said, there's no way I'm going there. I hit in a truck the first time I'm going in. I said, I'm not going to get arrested and go to Huautla. And he says, well, this guy's got a note from something like the Mexican CIA or something that we can get in as long as we don't go around the town or anything like that. So we went to Huautla and got in, and we were having to hide, and supposedly we could only be there 3 days, even with this note, because the federales were in the town. And that's when I saw my wife, Shirley. She was with this botanist, this guy, and they'd gotten lost, and the Indians had taken them there. And I said, how in the world did you get to this town? I said, you know, you're not supposed to be out here in the open. You're not supposed to be here. And I said to her, do you know about the mushrooms, you know? And he had been down there studying plants, and they had done some peyote somewhere else and way north. And I said, I'm going to try to go up to see Maria Sabina tonight. I said, are you interested? And she said yes, and she told David. And it was really interesting because she said, then the first thing I saw when I saw you, I want to have your children, which was a weird thing. She tells people that because I really looked like a wild man then, you know, from living in the woods. But anyway, it was a long, long, long hike up to her house. I mean, and it's constantly raining there, and you're in clouds, and sometimes the clouds would burst, and you were right in the middle of them. And it took a long time. They call it the Eagle's Nest, Waltla, because it's so high up in the clouds. Finally, we made it to her house, and we talked to her and her daughter and her son if they would do a ceremony, and they agreed to do one that night.
Wow.
And everybody else that was with us, everybody else decided to go back down and get maybe some sleeping material or a blanket or something, because her house was like adobe. The windows were wide open, straw roof. And I just said, I'm not going down. Well, if I make it to heaven, I'm staying here. She said, and I asked her if I could stay, and she said, yeah, you could stay. You could stay up here with me today. And so the other, we're going to come back that night. So I spent all day with her, observing her daughter and Apollonia, and she made some cacao and gave us some cacao in the middle of the day. And it was incredible, like the clouds coming through the house. I mean, open windows. I remember one time a lightning bolt went in one window and out the other.
Wow.
And she didn't even move an inch. She didn't even seem startled. And I just looked around. The only thing, a chicken in the house got upset and jumped up on a table. But that night when we did the ceremony was really incredible. She had us all get in a circle. The one thing that seemed the most important was she practiced and practiced and practiced your name till she could say your name like you say it. Like if you'd say your name Rain, I'd probably take a while till I could, with my hillbilly, to pronounce it just like you do. But she got it. So when the last time you said it, you didn't know who said it. And later during the ceremony at night, you'd hear your name and it would seem to bounce off the wall somewhere.
Wow.
Because she had a great
powerful,
ability.
You hear your own name in your own
Sabia.
voice, or with the same intonation that you call yourself. I mean, that's a pretty powerful. I mean, when you say somebody's name in general, it really elicits their attention. So if they're saying it in the way that you say it, I mean, how much more captivating is that?
Yeah, and she had also ventriloquy too. She could throw her voice, and her daughter sometimes during the ceremony would make birds chirping or different sounds of nature. And of course, there was a storm going on, but she also rubbed dirt from the floor of her house. She rubbed it on my knees. She rubbed that really good. And then she took a tobacco plant and rubbed the tobacco plant from my arm right up through here as a poultice. She rubbed that on there as a poultice. And then she went to her altar, and there was a Nina de Atocha and John the Baptist, I think, in the river with Jesus, and and she would chant and everything. And when she had the mushrooms ready, she presented each one of mushrooms. But she and her daughter really emphasized when we were on the mats that wait, but when you eat them, don't hesitate. Everybody eat them all at the same time. Like, don't hold back. You don't sit over there waiting. Eat everything that she gave you.
Go ahead
and they were paired up and in honey or something?
No, there was no honey. They were just, she gave us on pears, typically on a banana leaf. I think one person got his on a really old piece of newspaper from somewhere, because they didn't have newspapers delivered in Waltla. Somebody must have left it there.
Interesting.
Well, anyway, then when we're sitting on the mats, it's like, and I explained one of my friend's visions in the book, that he had his story about what he saw and felt, and I described mine. A lot of it's personal, but her chanting, when she started going, you can really feel your body starting to resonate with the earth. It's almost like your body starts humming, and your body starts humming, and you can feel the spirits of the earth coming out of the ground, and the life force of the ground, and what I call myself the sacred divine feminine, and your body coming on. And then I feel like then you have what's called a velada, which is the night vigil in our house. You go in what's called a viaje, which is like this special different places. Like I was sitting next to Shirley, who had stayed up there with me, And I can't explain it, but it's like we felt we had met in previous lifetimes. We'd seen each other in lifetimes, but I don't mean like an ego personality or something. The Aztec believe there's three parts of you, and one part gets sort of reincarnated and goes into the energy field, and the other two just go away. But it was like we'd had this sort of thing, and then I had visions of Maria Sabina, and I had all sorts of visions of, in my book, what I write about. And there's David there too, my wife, Shelley. She didn't want to write or put her visions down to put in my book, and so I respected that. And then when we were leaving, it was really amazing. The next day, we spent some time with Maria Sabina, and she and Apollonia came up to me and she said, "You know, you're going to go past the army and everything, and we want you to be safe getting out." And she says, "This will enable you to go and pass through without any trouble." And she gave me these Sorosha, which were like almost like you call them truffles. They look like they look to me like purple walnuts, sort of.
Yeah.
And so she gave me these, and I actually took them across the border. The way I looked, the border guards really, really, really searched me, you know. But they looked right at them. They didn't even know what they were or have any idea. They looked like just walnuts that were purple. And I ate those in Tennessee. I took them back to one of my friends, and I report in the book, he takes them, and he lives out in the mountains, sort of this place, King College, and he spent the night going around and talking.
We're joking. You are a hillbilly, huh? Talking about
yeah, I'm a real hillbilly. I'm from the mountains of Northeast Tennessee. So my friend, he went around talking to the beech trees that night up on this one hill.
Okay.
Anyway, so Maria Sabina there's Henry Munn, a guy, Henry Munn, M-U-N-N, wrote this incredible thing called The Uniqueness of Maria Sabina. You can Google it or find it online. And he talks about her. There's also people that talk about her poetry. She was considered a sabia, where she really had wisdom besides just being a curandero, that the book of creation was shown to her. When she was a little child, she and her sister had a job of walking with the chickens with the stick to keep the hawks from getting them.
Uh-huh.
So she'd walk around and she would find these mushrooms as a young girl and eat them. Now, she was in ceremonies with people of her families who were curanderos and curanderas. In fact, her grandson is doing this now, and I've seen a picture of her great-granddaughter in one of these ceremonies participating. I felt like she had the same presence of Maria. It gave me chills just thinking about it. It was a story about a curandero, and I mentioned in my book, I can't think of the title right now, but he went from Mexico City to participate with the son, and he was training this young man who he sent there. He said, part of your training is you're going to have to go there and take the mushrooms. That's part of your training.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so he went there and took the mushroom, and I know we're missing Oliver Quintella on this movie, but it was amazing to see his what I call modern movie.
The Little Saints documentary.
Yeah, Little Saints Talk to God, because these are all millennial type people, and Waltland had changed a lot, but I felt the sincerity of the mushroom ceremony was there. And also the church was way more accepting of it. It seemed like the church had integrated into the church entirely in Waltla, you know, because Maria Sabina was a great Catholic. She was a midwife. She was a healer. She was known for keeping all her family alive in those conditions and doing her ceremonies in the great wisdom. And she's sort of like an icon in a lot of Mexico now, sort of like if you go places and you see a Bob Marley t-shirt, but I think Bob Marley's all over the world now, but she seems to be limited to Mexico, you know?
Well, here in California, we've seen her a lot, and people talk about her all the way up the coast where everywhere the mushrooms grow and can be picked wild.
Yeah, I was going to say within the mushroom community, her name is definitely known.
Yeah, and I met with Wasson a couple of times. I met with him and Albert Hoffman, who invented LSD, and Schultes in '78 at a convention of, I guess, people like us in San Francisco. And I went to see him the year before he died and stayed at his house with him like a day and a half and got permission from his daughter to go to his archives. And he actually sent me his last book. His daughter did. He said, because I've been exchanging letters, and it was really nice that she sent me a letter saying, you know, my dad wanted you to have this book. And that book was pretty incredible, especially the part about Jonathan Ott, about the disembodied eyes at the temple in Teotihuacan,
disembodied eyes. You know, it reminds
yeah,
me
all over
of
these
R.R.
pyramids.
Tolkien or something, the eye of what, Zoran or something.
Right.
Yeah, well,
and even
this
that,
was
The
for a
all-seeing
particular
eye.
type of mushroom ceremony, but what really, really irritates the hell out of me sometimes are people printing stuff about Wasson that I don't consider true or are really not true at all. You know, about his history, and also people quoting Maria Sabina and saying things about her that are absolutely not true.
yeah, tell us about that.
And it really irritates me, some of these people. I don't know why they say these things or make up these things. Like one rumor, for example, you hear a lot, was all these celebrities went to Waltman.
Yeah, I've heard that.
As far as any, I can talk and know people there, no, none of them ever went. None of them. Larry never went there. He was in Cuernavaca, but some people there say that John Lennon was there. But you know, the Beatles never played in Mexico. They had a concert in Mexico City that got canceled. But some people say that Lennon was there. But all the other people you hear about, I don't think they were ever there. Though there was a lot of people there causing a problem where the army had to, and the government shut the place down, which was easy to do because you had to go up over this big mountain to come down almost in this bowl-shaped place. You're only like, if I remember, 2 roads in and out. So they had army posts there and then the federales in the town to make sure they get the undesirables out like me. But then it opened up again after 77. And I guess a lot of things had changed then. And
yeah, they're saying Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Mick Jagger, and Keith Richards all visited Maria Sabina.
Well, the thing of it is, you never ever hear any of them ever say they were there.
Yeah.
You can't find anywhere that they say they were there, and you can't find any pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally don't believe they went there. Not that it matters one way or another, but there are some people there that I believe that as a young child, they believe they saw John Lennon there.
Well, there's also a rumor that it could have been Paul McCartney. Weird.
I've heard the John Lennon one, you know, that he and Yoko went to see her. And that sounds like something he might do.
Well, you know, you got to realize these places were really rugged and primitive to get to. The desert surrounding Waltwell on the outside looked like some sort of desert on Mars. There were the strangest cactus you could ever imagine. And I used to drink pulque a lot to sort of ride in the saddle, if you know what I mean, to get you know, it's a type of homemade beer. Okay. But there's people that talked about at that time, that area was almost like Neanderthal. You know, in fact, people still using donkeys, walking and carrying things. You know, you found out an awful lot of people that were Europeans or Westerners, they would freak out in Mexico City or in the normal places. The culture would just freak them out, or they'd get Montezuma's revenge and head off. You know, there was sort of like a hippie cult place. It's still a place that people went to called Zipolite. Because back then Nixon had a bounty on people's heads, and the other place was Barrio de Navidad in the north, but Zipolite, they were like Indians and people avoiding the draft and Europeans and different people there, and you were sort of safe from the federales coming down there because they wouldn't go that far. Oaxaca was really controlled politically by the big shots out of Acapulco. they had a state government, but it was the big shots in Acapulco that were calling the shots. And that was way north of Puerto Escondido, which was way north of Zipolite. And there was, incredible bouncy, dirty roads. Maybe a farm truck would get in there now, but you didn't even have buses going there.
Right. Super.
Back then, people would get on a bus with a pig or flowers or produce or chickens and take them to the marketplace or somewhere to sell. Like I said, there was no refrigeration. And like I said, a lot of what I would call normal European people or Western people would be totally, absolutely freaked out by those conditions. No air conditioning, no communication to the outside world.
Yeah, a lot of those areas are still like that too, even in southern Texas.
Yeah. Well, somebody's been to southern Texas, I take it.
Yeah.
A little bit. Right up there against the, the Mexican border, pretty much.
That's where the peyote grows. That was a Huichol area for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I went to see the Huichol for about 2 weeks, and it was amazing. I was told I'd have to spend 4 days or I don't know, like 2 weeks going in by donkey to see them. They're very, very isolated places.
That's
of
pretty
the
isolated.
Sierra Madres.
On a donkey. That's
and
definitely.
I found out that there was this guy that would go up in the area and drop people out on a little plane, a little Piper Cub-like plane. And he would come back 2 weeks later. You paid him some money, he'd come back 2 weeks later. That's how they took some stuff to market. So I went up there, and it was amazing. I came out in a wedding ceremony, but the thing about the Huichols, what you got to realize, they don't have a city or a basic place back then that you lived in. San Andres Cobijan, where I went, there wasn't, and you'd go over to an area of the Sierra Madres and look out, and you'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden your eyes would, oh yeah, there's a hut over there. And you could see these sticks that somebody's living there. And after about maybe an hour, I would have spotted 7 or 8 more scattered all over. But it was amazing being in the town with the Huichols, because when they would come into town or come in this little place, they normally gathered there for sacred ceremonies. That's why the Catholics would put their church there. I remember this one ceremony, it's like with the peyote button. During the church service, they all shot arrows into Jesus.
Nice.
Because, but you didn't hear anything. These people were incredible. It reminded me of Maria Sabina. A lot of people they were either barefooted or had the barest of sandals on, and their feet looked like they grew out of the earth. Their skin looked the same color as the earth. And these people had an amazing presence. Like, they just didn't talk a lot. They just really, really didn't talk a lot.
Yeah, what they
But
said.
I only stayed up there about like 2 weeks in that area before I went back down, and then I went to the mushroom country.
So they did. So they're like really sensitive to each other. They're feeding off of each other. Or they're interpreting each other instead of through words, through body language, and through energetic and maybe even telepathic exchange. Do you think?
I think so. Some, and there is supposedly when they go on this sacred ritual for this sacred peyote, people that have gone with them, and I didn't say, when you're out there, they're walking and not saying anything, and then all of a sudden they all turn and shoot at the same peyote button, shoot their arrows.
Wow.
And I still have a scarf from that area that I have, but they would have this sacred ceremony at night, which was sort of like a type of sacred mushroom ceremony, sort of called the twine ceremony. And everybody sits around a fire pit, right? And they're taking peyote, and the head shaman has given them peyote, and he's doing what he's doing. And there's a sacred mushroom ceremony like this in my book. And what somebody would do, they would tie a piece of the twine and say, throw it in the fire and say, I stole some of your chickens this year.
Oh,
and somebody else would tie a piece and then throw it in the fire and say, well, I got your goat. And the guy would tie and say, well, I went over and had sex with your wife, or something like that.
They just share all their darkest secrets,
Yeah, and you could actually hear that twine go in the fire, and it would make a sound like a scream or something, and just burn up. But this was a way of getting rid of the angst. And there's a sacred mushroom ceremony where you do that too, but you don't have, you could say something or not, but you're just throwing these things you've tied up into the fire, you know.
Right,
and
right.
The idea is
Fire,
that
sacred.
what I say, and this is me, is you have things that are on your mind or bother you or make you cringe. Something that you did was mean or hateful or ugly, or something that you did and you're sort. And when that memory comes back to you, you can almost feel your body cringe. Oh my gosh, did I do that?
Let go of it.
And so when you do this, it's a way of sort of like exercising it.
Right. Letting it go.
But the Huichol were very special people. Like, only the shaman was supposed to say the name of their god.
Wow. How do you get into this stuff, Tom? How did you get into to all these little places? They just have good luck, or do you know the right people? Yeah.
Well, it's just, I went to Barrio de Navidad and I found out about this place, San Andreas Cobija, and I found out about the Huichols, and I said, well, how do I get up there? And I found out it'd take about 2 weeks or more by a donkey to get there. And then this guy who was there said, well, this little plane flies up on that plateau about twice a month. So I found out where the pilot was and asked him to drop me off when he went up there.
It's wild.
He was there.
Yeah, what I'm asking, it's more of a maybe an esoteric, like, how did your intentional field, how did you manifest these relationships, these opportunities?
Well, I guess when I was down there, you know, and I felt some of this stuff from Barrio de Navidad, which is like almost like a hole in the wall place like Zipihuite. I went to this little Catholic church where they were selling some of the Huichol's things for them, you know, to help them make money.
Yeah.
And I really, really was impressed by this stuff. I could see, like, for instance, I could show you a picture or two I've still got on the wall if you want to see them. I could just pick them off. It'd take me a second.
Yeah, you mean the yarn art, the psychedelic yarn art? Yeah, I know what you're.
I'll get to it. It'll just take a second.
So, if you're listening to the show, this is Hugh T Alkemi with Entheoradio, and I have a special guest on today, Tom Lane, and I'm being joined by Rain Grant, who is Can Mushrooms Save the Planet documentarist. And this is, if you're watching the video, we're seeing Tom show, looks like a sacred Huichol ceremony to honor the spirit.
And you can see the Curandero there, their special name for him, I forget it right now, and there's a sacred fire, and there's peyote, and the spirit coming out of the fire.
Wow.
And I said, man, that's something else. And then here's another one.
Oh, it's a flying reindeer.
Well, this sacred deer, and I was up there talking to this one guy who was translating in Spanish, and he was actually talking to me about having sex with the sacred deer. I mean, it was really far out listening to some of these guys. I mean, sacred spirit deer, and then you see the peyote and stuff. But these things go
the
way
deer
back.
or the deer itself. I'm sorry, I lost you there.
These things go way back to 73 and early. They're pretty original stuff. And I also have a scarf, which I won't show you, about the squirrel that stole fire from the gods for the Huichols.
Wow.
And then I went to the museum in Mexico City because I wanted to learn about the sacred mushroom, and I was blown away. I could just feel the statues vibrating. And especially one time I was in front of the statue called Coliquique. She was the one that turned into the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Yes.
And she's two-headed with two snakes coming out of the top and skulls all around her and everything. I'm going to bring up a picture of her. And it was like, you know, I had been in the Army infantry, and, you know, sometimes you gain a thing of a presence, or like you're a hunter, that there's something around that you're your back starting to crawl, or you feel like something really strange is going on.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
Okay.
I could feel my skin crawling, you know. And so I turned around and looked, and there was this statue.
Interesting.
And it was just unbelievable. And then that's when I decided to go to Chichen Itza and Palenque in that area. And I was really lucky when I was in Palenque. That's when they let you climb Palenque. I don't think they do anymore. And I was there after night. I actually slept on it because the guards weren't watching. There weren't anybody there. You have this one room at this great pyramid there, the Pyramid of the Sun.
Okay.
And it was only open 1 hour a day, and there wasn't a lot of people when I was there. And this guy said, "You want to go up to the top room?" And I said, "Yeah." And so we climbed inside and went inside, and it just seemed like it took forever. And that's when I got in there. I saw the red jaguar, and that had a stunning effect on me. It looked like its eyes were following me.
Oh, wow.
Really? And were you on mushrooms at this time, or is this
Oh,
just
no,
like
no. I hadn't done any mushrooms till later when I went to Palenque.
Right. So you were just
a friend of mine, Maria,
exploring the ethnography of the area. You were just kind of exploring the way that Richard Evans Schultes explores, right?
Well, I wouldn't put myself in his category, but I was out trying to find this stuff out, and it was just amazing to me how things were carved. Like, for an example, if you go out in front of this great pyramid, and I could show you a picture of this, but I won't, but there's two huge, it looks like monster rattlesnakes coming from the top down. And on the equinox, on either side, the sun actually makes the scales of the serpent Quetzalcoatl.
Huh.
The scales are actually made on the equinox. You can look up Chichen Itza equinox, and you'll see that. You'll see the scales actually formed.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
And another thing is, if you stand out in front of the pyramid and clap your hands anywhere out in front of the pyramid, it makes
echo?
the chirrup sound of the Quetzal bird. If you do like that, the echo off of it is a sound of the Quetzal bird.
Interesting.
And some of these pyramids are unbelievable. Like, I don't know if you've discovered at Teotihuacan, they discovered a tunnel underneath it recently. And this is in National Geographic, and they actually found a pool of mercury under the center at the very center.
Wow.
At this pool of mercury. And I have some friends that were there during the solstice, where some of the people that knew that archaeologists got permission to go back in there. They said at the height of the solstice, the mercury in the whole place started vibrating.
Oh, wow.
Very curious. Oh, no. We don't want to scare Rain away. This could be a little bit of a conspiracy theory. I'm sensing the vibration of conspiracy. What do you think?
I want to get back to aphrodisiacs, you guys.
She's like, there's one portal, and we're only going through that one. But no, really, no, I'm curious. I would love to know. I'm all in for occult and paranormal research, and
absolutely,
there's a lot of pyramids throughout the world that have these weird underground chambers, and there's one in China that had mercury in an emperor's tomb. So what do you think, Tom, is the mercury related to with these?
I don't know. You know, if you go to National Geographic, it's fairly recent. They discuss you about discovering this, and they found the mercury and everything. But I have a group of friends that I've done sacred mushrooms in the desert before, and they know somebody, and they go down there for the solstice. And this one time, I don't know if it happened the second time they went there, somehow, because of the person they knew and the archaeologists, they got to go back there. And they said they mentioned something of seeing Talak, but they said at the high noon of the solstice, the mercury just started quivering and vibrating there, and you could feel the whole earth vibrating and resonating.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow. How interesting.
And so, you know, Palenque was unbelievable. Like Palenque, Pascal, the great god of the Mayans. When Palenque was discovered, it was totally isolated in the jungle, covered up. And supposedly Chicle Tree people took some people back there and showed them where Palenque. Well, Palenque would be sort of like a spiritual center of the Mayans. In the jungle there, it just hums. I mean, you feel like you're in a jungle, a triple canopy jungle, and it's humming. Well, something like 20, 50 years, I don't know how long after it's discovered, they discovered at the very top, if you open this particular, they found an opening, and it went down a spiraling staircase that you could just barely, maybe two people walk side by side. When they get to the bottom, there's this sarcophagus, which has a lid on it that is about like bigger than a really big door, and like made of thick stone, about like 6 inches thick. And when they slid it back, it's all in the museum in Mexico City now, and a replica there. Of course, they couldn't get the stone out of there because this whole thing had to be built around it. But the Pascal is like covered in jade. His whole face, his body is covered in jade. But on the top, you can see him, and there's this sacred tree of life that's growing, coming out of the earth, going to the heavens. And he's picking like sacred mushrooms off of it.
You're talking about Pakal, the Ahau Pakal?
Yeah, there's sort of two different names for him. He's spelled two different ways. And I believe he was one that must have brought all this information to his people,
right,
and trained them in certain ways. One thing the Aztec and especially the Mayans were into was a type of astrology that's totally different than ours.
Yes.
Venus has an 854-day rotation around the sun. The Earth has a 365, and of course, about the rotation of the moon around the Earth. Well, these three rotations, the Mayans figured out a way of alignment. Like you'd move something like this to line all three up.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And they were aware that certain things happen on certain days. Like they were aware that sunspots happen on certain days, and it would affect your blood and affect your body.
Wow.
And this type of astrology was more like omen-like. Okay, this energy's coming in from the sun. This energy's coming in from the alignment of Venus, the sun, and the earth. And most people that study this believe that these ancient sages said, okay, my great-grandfather, back when there was this alignment, this is what he and the people said happened, and it's in this alignment again, and we're feeling the exact same thing happen again. The same type of vibrations and stuff, and the ability of, to affect people here on Earth. So these were the three things that they were really interested in, and they actually knew way before the Europeans that Venus rotated counterclockwise.
Mm-hmm.
And Venus was the most important thing because you see Venus represented also going into the underworld. It was called the morning star in the morning, but also the Lord of the dawn, the evening star. And a lot of this symbolism of death and rebirth evolved around the male-female serpent going in and going through the underworld and coming out again and an ascension to the sun. This was a type of energy that transferred between the earth and the sun. And you can really see this in rains. If you're out in a rainy, sunny day sometime, you can see the plants singing and sending all this energy flowing through the ground of the earth and the sun, and it's going back and forth.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Yeah, there's some interesting correlations between the morning star, Lucifer, and the serpent, the snake, and the DNA caduceus symbols. And again, it's Mercury, and we hear about the hermaphrodite Hermes. Again, we're gesturing at the idea that Mercury and Quetzalcoatl are these beings that are neither male or female, or that can be male and female simultaneously.
Yeah, to the Aztecs and to the Meso-Americans, it wasn't so much hermaphroditic, though they all recognize things like homosexuality, like Coachapilli and different ceremonies, and they didn't label people, but they considered male and female, like life and death, share the same spine. And the idea was you have to get in balance on earth. There wasn't an idea of good and evil like the Christian good and evil. If you ask the Aztec what's good or what's evil or a sin, or they had no concept of that, but they had a concept that the earth is a really slippery place and you have to get your life in balance. And this was what all this rebirth is about. And it wasn't an easy thing. Like there's this ancient Aztec story about a beggar, a rag picker, and he finds a sacred box. And this box has all these sacred jewels and stuff in them. And it's relating to the mushroom. It's like divination. It's like all these cures. It's all these things to heal with. And these special jewels, and he can't figure any of them out. He knows it's important. So he goes to a priest and he has the priest, well, show me how to work. Show me how to make this work. Show me what to do with it. And the priest says, well, you know, this takes years. You have to learn this. I can't just show you this right now. And so the beggar gets really mad and tries to kill him. And of course, then all these spirits come out of the lake, the trees, the pond, and they tear the beggar up and throw him in the lake or do away with him. But it's more like a mythological tale to let people know that these things are, you know, valuable tools, but you have to spend time, sort of like Quetzalcoatl would often spend time in caves meditating on this and doing a certain type of penance, you know, in regards to this. And, you know, you had to learn these things. This is what blows me away when somebody thinks they go to a tourist trip to South America or take a seminar online, and now they're a shaman or a curandero. You know, for one thing, it's the plant that chooses you. And there's incredible stories. There's a story in Walla about this guy had seen 6 doctors and didn't want to, you know, they couldn't heal him. And he comes to Walla and he sees a curandero there, and he is in a ceremony. And the ceremony in there that says you can be healed, but you have to become a curandero. And the guy says, well, I don't want to do this. I live back in the here and then. So I'm sorry, you have a choice. Well, it doesn't matter to us. It just doesn't matter. It's a choice. You know, if you want to be healed, here's the path, and you have to become a curandero. And supposedly the guy did. Wow. One of the most amazing stories I heard in '78 at the conference was about this woman who was told she only had like 3 months to live, or less than 3 months, probably sometime between 2 to 3 months. And she was given the mushrooms, and the story was that she was like 2 months or month and a half pregnant. And when she took the mushrooms, her baby got in touch with her and told her, oh, this ain't going to work. You have to live. Okay. You have to, you're going to have to heal your body, because I can't live if you don't live. And at the time, I thought it was some type of mental telepathy or intuition.
Oh yeah, even without plant medicine, you can connect with.
But later, I found out in a 2016 article of Scientific Magazine that the baby and the mother are actually sharing brain cells.
Oh.
So there's a type of connection there, you know, a sacred connection between the mother and the baby. But that was amazing effect on that story. You know, this was 1978 when Hoffman and Wasson and Schultes were there. You know, that story just blew me away.
Wasson have a son? I'm throwing that out. I think he reached out to me. I mean, it was either Wasson or somebody else's son. Is that possible? Does anybody know the answer to that?
What about that?
No.
Wasson having a son.
He had a daughter, Masha.
Okay.
I think he may have had a son. I know his daughter, Masha, I think she lives in Texas now.
Okay.
And you sort of have to get permission from her to visit the archives or everything if you're, you know, not a scientist or something. You know, like with me, I had all these letters I'd saved from Wasson and the letters from her, and I sent them the archives, and I said, I'd like to come see this and research certain things, you know. And so I think they contacted her, and I got permission for spend about 2 days there looking. And Wasson was unbelievable, the files he kept. There's going to be a story come out in 2026 about the Amanita Muscara and the Ojibwe tribe. One of the things that was really disappointing when I saw him in 86, you know, and I corresponded, but I hadn't talked about it. I said, where's your book about Kianokwe and the Ojibwe and everything? Because I had cassette tapes of her and everything. He brought her there, and she had told all these stories about use of Amanita Muscara of these Indians on the Canadian American border up in central, you know, the central places around Michigan in that area. And he said, well, I'm not going to publish that book now. He said, she didn't want me to, and I'm going to hold off. But I found out at the archives that's going to be released in 2026, which is about, I guess, 6 or 7 years from now. It'll be made available to the public. And there's
very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and
on 2026.
yeah. And but he was a real gentleman, Watson. He was just an unbelievable gentleman. And
nice.
Especially Hoffman too, and Schultes. I came up to all three of them. I remember the first thing I saw them over there after they're talking. I just walk up to them just like, you know, a normal hillbilly walking up to them, and I said, hey, I want to ask you a question. And the first question I asked is, what do you think about all this Carlos Castaneda stuff? And Watson looked at me, and the thing he said, Castaneda isn't real, but Don Juan is. And
yeah,
Hoffman and Schultes both nodded, and then we talked a little bit about that. And Watson carried on a tremendous amount of correspondence with Castaneda way after other people were calling him a fraud and a total thing. He was being a real gentleman. And when I was looking through his files, I saw one thing that absolutely proved that Castaneda was a fraud to me. Was he was carrying on these letters, and he asked him, he said, well, where did you find these mushrooms? Did you go south, or this Don Mateos or whatever, you know, the little smoke? And he said, well, yeah, he could command them to grow anywhere out of the earth. He could command them to grow. And I thought to myself, what absurd BS. Nobody can command a plant. You can enjoin plants and plant spirits. You can work with them. But the idea that you're going to command this mushroom to grow out of the earth, there's no curandero or shaman or anybody on the earth that can do that. You know, that's ridiculous.
He's claiming that he commanded the mushroom and it just came up out of the ground.
It just came up out of the desert.
Wow.
And you've got these other curanderos, like I mentioned, I think it's called the Serpent and the Sun, who had it. They knew they had, when I was there in the mountains, there were some curanderos that came down there to get mushrooms. And a couple of them, because they didn't grow down there, they gave me some peyote. They had brought some peyote with them.
Okay, so mescaline.
And
nice.
This whole idea, he did a tremendous amount of damage. Especially the idea about eating or drinking docturas. I saw people actually lose their mind. I'm talking about going nuts.
Right.
That were crazy enough to drink that stuff or drink a tea from it. It was often rubbed on the body different places. But I have a chapter in my book about that they relate to werewolfism, where people that would drink those teas and stuff, they'd go through a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't want to be around anybody like that.
And this is your book, Mushroom Rituals?
Sacred Mushroom Rituals, A Search for the Blood of Quetzalcoatl. It has about 3 or 4 pages in there about the use of tobacco or docturas or brugomancia during these ceremonies.
Very nice.
So in your book, do you have any of these like recipes and things like that, you know, having to do with the mushroom rituals, or you know, how
I do some. I talk about in particular, I'm writing a new book on the sacred mushroom of the deified heart, but at the last I talk about taking it and ascribing it, just like I did to you just now. And then I talk about some of these events, but I talk about the main thing is for you to consider it a sacrament.
Right.
And not get hung up on a certain type of ritual or anything, to, you know, respect the earth, and don't have any pre-canned songs or anything. I say, okay, if you're a Buddhist, like I've done it with Buddhists and had them chant Nambo Renge Hey, you know, and
Sure, sure. Mm-hmm.
something that's interior to you, a certain type of meditation, a certain type of chant.
Sure.
You know,
It seems like it's really personal when you're doing any of these.
There's not something pre-canned here, and you know you're with your people, or people somewhere, and it's more like you're recognizing that this is sacred to you, that this is the sacrament, and that's why I don't use words like magic or hallucinogenic or psychedelic, because I believe the way you speak, the way you talk, your respect for what you're doing, you have to have that to really to enter these portals or everything, because the mushrooms they're closer to an animal than a plant. You know that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so, I know what they're feeling and like that. Like I've gone to pick mushrooms before, especially the Zapotecas, and actually had them start dancing, moving all around. I'm not talking about moving back and forth like this. I'm talking about going up and down. And
I believe it. I grow kombucha, and I sing to my kombucha, and I've seen the mother itself start swaying, and I was like, what? So absolutely. I mean, it's conscious, it's aware, it's energetic, and it's going to respond to stimuli. And sound is powerful.
And I remember one time we were in there and we were singing to the mushrooms, and they started dancing. This one girl from America, she passed out. It was too much for her consciousness.
Oh, wow.
Lucky she was on a mat. And later she woke up, and we told her, and we had a ceremony, and she wanted to think we're all somebody special, or that we were some type of guru or Curandero. Finally, we had to tell her to leave, this isolated place. I said, this is all comes from you. We don't have anything that you can't get. You got to quit thinking that there's something special about, well, it was Tony and Loa and myself, and, this is all within you. I mean, people have to get past the infantile stage of like they need some guru or something, or they need something. They just need to be shown what to do and to travel within to find it and everything, and know that these feelings that they're loved and they'll be taken care of, and that there are some ceremonies where, there's sort of a ceremony where you go into the underworld and you meet total fear and total death. And the only way you overcome that is by loving it.
Yeah.
And things change. I went to a place where every root was a rat trying to eat me, and the leaves on trees were snakes trying to bite me. And it was just like I formed this image of Quetzalcoatl, and it was like, okay, love all this and love every bit of it. And it all changed. It really changed. Everything went back. And then I went into a really meditative state. And it's this Curandero had told me, he said, everybody can take the trip to heaven, and some people want to go into the underworld and see what it's like. And he says, you're too damn curious. I know you'll want to do it one time, and so I made that thing. And then later, sometimes the first time, not after that, Quetzalcoatl will come as a big dragon, a black dragon going to devour you and everything. And that's the first time he came to me, and it was like, I guess to scare me off. And I said, okay, wow, that's fantastic. You're going to eat me, and I'm going to turn you into pure love. I love you. I'm going to infinite kindness, and when you swallow me up, you'll change. And then he immediately turned into diamond rainbow serpent.
Oh, wow. So yeah, bringing it back to what you were saying in the very beginning about channeling this, or Quetzalcoatl coming in and teaching you how to embrace love and joy and gratitude and being able to totally face your fears and death, and that's basically, what we all struggle with. It seems like in life in general, many people are afraid of death and afraid of life and death, really.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's the power of the healing and everything comes from getting rid of that fear. And once you get rid of that fear, then there's not a whole lot left. Of course, you keep your sanity and your wisdom about you. And some things were really amazing. I remember one time there was this shepherdess, and she was amazing. I watched her deliver birth to a baby in the field with her sheep. And she had a little daughter with her. And she'd come into my hut sometimes, and she wasn't really a curandero or anything, but she'd come one time and she said she wanted me to come help or pray or something. She lived way up in the mountains, and her daughter had gotten really, really sick. and she'd given her daughter mushrooms and nothing had happened. And she'd taken them herself, and her daughter was sick. She thought she was going to die. So I went up there, and it was the biggest lightning storm I've ever seen in my life. The whole mountain was shaking with the lightning and everything. We felt like a lot of the people that maybe Talak was around, and we were in there. We didn't have mushrooms. We were just at this little altar, and a lot of the people up there where they had a doorway, there's no door. It's just an opening. And there was a candle or two in there. And this sounds amazing, but in the middle of the night, all of a sudden we see this brujo in the door, and he walks over and touches the girl on the head and just puts her hand on for a while, and then turns around and walks out.
Wow.
And it was like we were both looking. It was really amazing. If I hadn't seen water on the floor or the drippings, I would have thought it was like a dream, or I hadn't really seen it, because there was lightning flashing, and I just felt like Talak in the mountain answered that it was her prayers and everything that caused him to come there, that he didn't really have a choice, that he was basically told by Talak to go there and heal this young girl.
Beautiful. There's some really powerful life experiences you have, and it seems to me like you've sought out the extraordinary, and you've traveled and you've experienced cultures in a way that a lot of people were afraid to, during a generation in which the war on drugs was really, really prevalent.
Yeah, it was really freaky when I came back with my wife, Shelley, and we lived in St. Louis. We lived in this old house at Laclede, and we discovered ways of growing the mushrooms that were sort of really underground there. People were even almost scared to talk to you.
Yeah.
And growing them in agar and transplant was a huge, horrible technique to do. And a lot of times it didn't work, but we grew lots and lots of mushrooms, but we always gave everything away and gave it to people. People were blown away. Why are you not even charging for the jars? And I said, look, I don't want any karma involved with money in mushrooms. And I said, I just don't want to do that. But there were some amazing things that happened to people that I describe a few things in the books from, but now it's unbelievable how people can grow it from these syringes that get sent with spores in them, and technically they're not illegal,
Right.
So recently I've done that a little bit, but I'd always gone out in a cow pasture here in Florida and found them when everything was right,
Just get them out in the wild.
Yeah.
So those are wonderful sacred journeys, and a lot of these stories are told in your book, Sacred Mushroom Rituals: The Search for the Blood of Quetzalcoatl. Where can people find your book, Tom?
Well, it's on Amazon, and the book on Amazon is 308 pages and 8.5 by 11, and a lot of color pictures. I spent a lot of money on the art and design of this book.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it looks
and it's
beautiful.
a little expensive. It's like $58, I think, but the Kindle version is just $9.99.
Okay. Very nice.
All right, so people can order it from you on Amazon and also put it on their Kindle. And how do I get a copy from you with your autograph? Sign it.
Well, tomorrow I'm leaving for Brazil, so that's a little tight. But if you send me something with your email and address on it and everything, and I just sell my books for the same price as Amazon, like $58, because I spend a lot of money on shipping. I have to put it in a very special shipping container with a lot of plastic and everything, so it gets to you. It costs me about $10 to ship it. Amazon does it for free.
Sure.
Nice. Yeah, so I want to encourage people to reach out to you. What's the best way for people to find you and contact you? If it's not your website, then give us some social media.
Yeah, my Facebook site, Sacred Mushroom Rituals and Ceremonies, is probably one of the best, or my email, Tom Lane, Lane Solar, SOLAR @gmail.com.
Excellent. And I want to thank you and all the listeners and our guest host, Rain Grant, for being on the show, Entheoradio, today. Anything you want to say, Rain?
Yeah, just this is beautiful information, and I think it's all really good to collect the data like this, and I'm really glad to be able to connect with people through the mycelial web of the internet and beyond.
Yeah, you know, it's like Terence McKenna talked about this. He never really had any curanderos or people he worked with, according to Dennis when I talked, but the internet enables us to connect it and spread information and get this information out there. And to me, it's very important to people to realize to do this in the wilderness during the day or do it in the wilderness. And I know it's good, but this idea of sitting down on a couch with binders on, listening to classical music and taking a pill may be beneficial, but it's not part of what I consider the reverence of the world, of the real world that's out there, this parallel world.
I'm glad that you're saying that and talking about the wilderness and the importance of doing this in the space of nature and being in touch with nature. You know, there are those like Terence McKenna and some of his followers who are adamant that you have to do it in a dark room, isolated, and a heroic dose. You know, so I don't know. I mean, I'm sure each has its benefits, and but nature seems to be the grand teacher.
Well, even at night and everything, the Aztecs were very much about this in nature, how you had your feet and Maria Sabina rubbing the dirt on your earth, on your knees, and, you know, like being out in nature in the real world. We've got to get out. You got to get out of this plastic world and everything that's around. Like I try to tell people is, you know, go to somewhere where you don't hear the sounds of civilization and you are isolated from anybody bothering you and everything, and to a sacred spring or high in the mountains somewhere. And that's where you can enjoy these spirits, and they're still there. There's nothing unique. This parallel world exists for all of us.
Absolutely. Well said and well experienced. Thank you for going through this process with your lifetime, and sharing with the world through this podcast and other podcasts you have on your website and your book. Like I think maybe like you were saying in the beginning of this conversation, the most important days of your life are your birthday and the day you realize your purpose. And it seems like you've had at least a few days where you realized your purpose, Tom.
Yeah, and it's a struggle when you come back to this world, and you will come back to what I call the desert of the real. You know, when you come out of the real world, which is the real world of nature where dwelling people live, and you come back into the technological world, especially into the digital world, you know, and everything that's going on, it's hard to keep your sanity. There's a long time I only did it like once or twice a year just to check up and try to recover my sanity from the world I was working in, you know, as a solar contractor and everything at the time, and just in that business of installing solar and everything in the world, because the world seems to be getting nuttier as far as our relationship as dwelling people to the environment. And what I mean by that is the idea that a dwelling person sees a tree and he sees the spirit and he sees his relationship to it, and he can actually in a way talk to the trees, some of these people, where a technological person just sees so many board foot and lumber and maybe a house being built from that lumber.
I see, yeah.
And, you know, because our technology can control us. That's the scariest thing. I really like Martin Heidegger and his philosophy, and he talks about being in the aspect that a lot of this technology, we think we're in control of it, but it's actually in control of us.
I understand that completely. When I see someone obsessively scrolling social media all the way down, what are you looking for? I'm like, is there medicine in your social media scroll? Because there's not in any of mine.
Sometimes there is.
Well, you know, Huxley talked a lot about the soma and how people be somatized with drugs. And I really think that was the truth more than Orwell with the big Nazi police, only for the people to get out of line. But they've actually shown that these cell phones now, I know we're at the end of this, they create a thing called like nonophobia, and it actually is setting off endorphins in people's minds when they ring and stuff like that. And it really seems like it's affecting women in certain ways and men in certain ways, but it's creating a lot of negative things that people don't understand. It's in a way, it's a type of mind control. You're being programmed, really being programmed, much more than TV or anything like that. I feel I was lucky. I never saw a TV till I was 10 years old.
Nice. Well, you're one of the elders in the, I would call it, shamanic and theogenic community. And I want to thank you again for being on the show. And I hope that in a few months, when you're back from your travels, that we can hear from you again. And your next book will be coming out soon, next year.
No, it'll be about 3 years from now.
All right.
You guys got a copy, a preview of one of the chapters. I'm sort of slow in writing this stuff because I'm researching a lot of stuff. It takes a lot of time to figure out who 11 Lizard is and 4 Lizard and 9 Eagle Woman.
Nice. Thank you for doing that research. It feels paramount as somebody who was a Mayanist during the years leading up to 2012. I feel really akin and at home speaking about Mayan and other ancient technologies like reading those hieroglyphs and understanding and interpreting ceremony.
Yeah.
So
all right, well, I guess is it goodbye for now?
It is. Find Tom Lane's book, Sacred Mushroom Rituals, The Search for the Blood of Quetzalcoatl. Find it on Amazon.com, and you can look him up, Tomlane, and that's his author's name, and it looks like Joe Lane, and maybe your brother or something like that. He also co-authored.
No, that was my son. He wrote one chapter on the musicality of Maria Sabina.
Very nice. So we're mentioning your son, Joe Lane, and so
yeah, and he also
did
a chapter. He wrote a lot of it on Xochipilli and did a lot of research on Xochipilli.
Very cool. Very cool. So check this book out. Get it while it's still available. It looks like it's going to be a collector's item one day. It comes in an amazing full color printing, and you can find Tom on Facebook under Sacred Mushroom Rituals fan page or group.
It's a Facebook. This is a Facebook group. Anybody can join. Sacred Mushroom Rituals and Ceremonies. But we also go into ayahuasca a lot. We go into peyote. We haven't done too much in San Pedro, and even cannabis being used as a sacrament, like Tibetan temple balls or certain types of cannabis used in Tibet and other places as a sacrament.
Excellent. So, yeah, this is Captain Hugh T Alkemi with Entheoradio. Please tune in and enjoy this podcast and many others across the podcast media and distribution networks. We have Spotify, Castbox. We're on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram. And we're now on iTunes. Just look us up, ENTHEO Radio, Entheoradio, with Rain Grant and Travar and Tom Lane today. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Dan Vieja.
Dan Vieja.